Is it still legal? Because I know in other provinces it's not.
I know that it is certainly. I think it's BC. It's like an absolute no.
Mm-hmm.
Ontario, it is very much legal. It just needs to be acknowledged by both parties.
Mm-hmm.
So December 1st last year, we had new legislation roll into our real estate industry,
Okay.
which allowed for two types of representation. So you had a brokerage level representation and you had a designated representation.
Welcome to the Ottawa Property Podcast with your hosts Tony McNeil and Adolfo Alvarenga. Each week, they'll take a look at what's happening in the Ottawa real estate market and offer practical advice and insights for listeners. From market updates to success stories, they cover it all. Whether you're a first-time homebuyer, a seasoned investor, or just curious about the property landscape in Canada's capital, they've got you covered. Sit back, get comfortable, and let's get into it.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Ottawa Property Podcast. My name is Tony McNeil. I am a realtor based here in Ottawa, Canada, joined always by my co-host, Adolfo Alvarenga, a level 2 mortgage agent with referral mortgages, also here in Ottawa, Canada. Each week, we kind of dive into what's going on in our local markets, give you a small kind of topic that we're working on, and then some real-life experiences that we're going through. So
I always mark when you say level 2 mortgage agent.
It sounds better than level 1.
Sophisticated. Well,
hey.
Technically, yes.
I wish I was realtor level 2.
Is there levels? Whoa! Speaking of realtors, I heard you guys MLS system got completely changed.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, it's been a long week. Yeah. So
every realtor I've spoken to this week, they're like, "Oh man, MLS or MLS." I'm like, but then I logged in with Jan.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're amalgamating, like putting the amalgamating. Yeah, sorry, my ESL. But Toronto, all Ontario, basically.
I think that's what the end goal will be. I think in 5 or 6 years from now, it'll all be one kind of.
So you'll be able to see sales from here, then Toronto.
Yeah, exactly.
Anywhere in between.
So for anyone listening who's at all interested in this, and no offense if you're not, but prior to this, if I wanted to, or a client of mine wanted to see a listing in the Toronto area, or something that was listed with a Toronto agent who's part of the Toronto Real Estate Board, TREB, I would have to reach out to that agent or another Toronto agent that I knew to get that MLS data. It wasn't readily available, even though we're all part of OREA and CREA, which is our provincial and federal governing bodies. Now, as of Monday, we all have that data sharing going on. So they can see ours, we can see theirs. Like for me, it's been great because I've actually been showing some properties this week that have been listed by Toronto agents
in Ottawa?
Outside of Ottawa. So we're talking like Mallorytown area.
But still, you're talking about like Ottawa vicinities.
Yeah, there's
between Kingston and Ottawa, call it.
For sure. Yeah, if you get as far as Kingston, you'll see a lot of Toronto listings.
I'm surprised because it's not like they're doing that drive in case of anything.
Some of them do, some of them don't. It's one of those things where like because I worked in the Guelph area and I've worked kind of in the broader GTA for some deals, and we all have a radius that we're willing to drive or work within. Me personally, right now, like I wouldn't be able to take a listing. Not that I wouldn't be able to, but I wouldn't want to take a listing in Toronto or in Guelph simply because it's not the market I'm working in right now. So I would refer it out to a professional in that area, where I've seen Toronto agents. Like most recently, the most recent listing that I've sold, the buyer was represented by a Toronto agent, and he was making the 5-hour trip for every walkthrough, and they did 2 walkthroughs before they put an offer in. They did a 3rd walkthrough after the fact, and their final walkthrough is on Sunday. And he's driving, like that's 20 plus hours. It's more than that. It's like 40 hours because you're going 5 hours both ways.
Definitely earns commission on that. So, and I respect that because like it's not everybody that would do that. Like 5-hour drive and then 5-hour back.
Yeah, and I mean I get that you can see all the data, so I kind of respect it too in a certain way, but at the same time, I'm not the professional in that area, so I don't know I don't have my finger on the pulse of what's going on. So, I give the guy his accolades for making the trips and burning the gas and putting in the kilometers, but I don't know if he's really serving the client that well because it's not his market.
So that's the thing where I see it like it's very interesting. Where like some agents will reflect on that and actually have that front of mind, where like they see like, okay, look, this is not my area of expertise. I prefer to refer it to an agent that has it, which I think is honorable in the sense because you're just putting the benefit, like the client's well-being before anybody else, especially
100%.
on the sale aspect.
Yep.
Because
100%.
you could be thinking sale Toronto prices, sale Ottawa prices. It might not. It's not the same. They don't go hand in hand anywhere in Toronto compared to Ottawa. They're completely different.
Yeah,
right.
sure.
So obviously they can do their homework, they do their due diligence, but it's not the same as having somebody in the same location.
Yeah, boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Like working in it every day.
Yeah, especially if like something happens, like you said, like, okay, well, they have to do an inspection. What about a last minute showing?
Yeah,
Anything
yeah.
like that? Is he gonna 5-hour drive from there? Hey, I'll meet you in 5 hours. While somebody is here, like, hey, we can meet you in 30 minutes. Now, obviously, everybody has their times. Everybody has the efforts that they are willing to put through. But that also makes a difference of it too.
You know, I'll comment a little bit more after the close of this one.
Okay.
It closes next week.
Okay.
I'll give you my real kind of opinion on that. I don't want to comment
Transparent.
on it until it's a done deal.
That's fair.
But yeah, I've got some pros and cons that
We can just
really
hold the
discuss.
episode until we can just not upload it until you're done. I'm just
This
kidding. I'm just kidding.
conversation was pointless.
Hold on to it until that.
Should we just start over?
No, but like
reset.
reset the whole thing.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking though is it's actually interesting because it kind of segues into something that we wanted to talk about today, which was representing. Because now that you can see all data,
Mhm.
you can just not necessarily as representing both the client. If you're selling a place in Ottawa and they wanted to move to Toronto or vicinities,
Sure.
you can now see data there
Yes.
and kind of advise accordingly. Like I obviously have a feeling that you would probably refer it to somebody there, but you can at least have an opinion of it, and it's not like you're searching for somebody else to give you that opinion. If your clients come to you and be like, hey, do you know what this sells for? This sells, like, you know,
Sure.
it's kind of more transparent in that way, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, there's, like I said, there's benefits to it for sure. The data is it doesn't lie.
Mhm.
It's very important when coming up with comparable properties for, you know, coming up with our offer prices or sale prices or asking prices, whatever. In terms of helping someone on both ends, you know, it's always nice to be able to help someone on the sale and the buy, right?
Mhm.
Because you know, you're kind of working with someone like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're all on the same team, kind of coordinating these two things. Because most times, let's say 8 out of 10 times, probably someone can't afford 2 properties at the same time, right? So we have to time that appropriately. Like they can probably get what's called a bridge loan, that can tide them over for, you know, like let's say 30 to 90 days. But eventually the bank's going to say, hey, you can't hold on to
tell
both
me
of
more.
these properties.
Tell me more. I'm gonna let you do this. This is my side, but
I know.
I kind of like it because I can kind of see like what we've talked throughout the months and stuff like
for
that,
sure.
and
So-
kind of see where you see it as. But yeah, let's do it.
And
I'll be the
first
guest.
to
I'll be
say-
the guest and the listener
well,
today.
his mortgage minute. No, this is just from my experience working with guys like yourself. It's exactly that. So let's say a client really wants to sell, but the market's, as it has been for most of the year, is a little bit of a buyer's market, right? So it's not like they can just list it, sell it, and move on. We've tried a couple of what's called a sale of property condition, as in they put an offer on a property to purchase. It's conditional on them selling their property currently. So
before you move on to that, I just kind of want to touch base on that. How often do you see that bid approved?
Well, I was going to say this. You're leading me in right in my next point. So
I'm reading your mind.
You are. We're on the same wavelength. So that condition is tough to get accepted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially unless you have a property that's kind of been sitting for 30 plus days.
Mm-hmm.
I think a seller is going to be pretty hesitant to accept that. A good agent working for the seller is going to say, you know what, we've only been on 2 weeks. Like, do we really want to tie our property up? Although they do have what's called a first right of refusal, and they can sell it to someone else. That's
what first right of refusal means. That they have the ability to sell it to somebody else if an offer came in.
So the first right of refusal means if someone else comes to purchase that property that you have a conditional offer based on your sale of property, the seller has to give you 24 to 48 hours, whatever's written into the contract, as a first right of refusal for you to purchase the property.
Okay.
If you're unable to firm up on the property, then it would go to the next buyer.
Okay, that's fair.
So to answer your question, it's pretty difficult to get those accepted.
Yeah.
So that kind of led me into these bridge loans, and I've become a little bit more familiar with them this year because, you know, honestly, up until now, there hasn't been a total need for these because a lot of the times people were putting the for sale signs up and they were selling, and then they could go and purchase something, although it's quite competitive that way too. So timing is still very important. But with the bridge loan, let's say, like I said, they're having a little bit of difficulty selling, but the perfect property comes along and they don't want to miss out on this property. If they have the risk tolerance, because there is a lot of inherent risk with this, they could purchase this property, still have your financing and inspection conditions to make sure the numbers and the property are sound. But then you have a bridge loan lined up because you have two properties that you're carrying at the same time.
It depends on, and I'll kind of segue into my side of this stuff, and I'll kind of explain that. So a bridge loan, for those of you who don't know, is a mortgage that you get to essentially cover the down payment for the new purchase.
Sure.
So it will be the funds that will be
from the
left over from the proceeds of the sale that will go towards the down payment of the new property. Not every financial institution has the capacity to do this.
Sure.
Some of them have limitations. Majority of them have about 90 days, 90 to 120
too,
days. Right? Correct, because they have money sitting in, right?
100%.
So how this works in perspective is there's this bridge loan that the lawyer has at the moment of selling the home, the sale of their home, their existing home. The lawyer has to remove the mortgage that was on that property, on title, and also pay off this bridge loan to the financial institution. Usually, you're getting bridge loan from the same institution that is selling, that you're buying with.
Sure.
Because they're the ones that will bridge that gap of it. So the mortgage company or bank makes the lawyer sign an affidavit, I believe it is, and they're responsible for paying that out from the proceeds of the home. So, however, and this is where it kind of comes tricky, because like, depending on where you are at with your mortgage, at the term of your mortgage, so if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you're able to do different things. And depending on the financial institution, you're able to do different things. So you're able to port that mortgage.
What do you mean by port, for anyone who
doesn't know? Port essentially means that you're keeping your mortgage terms of your current mortgage and you're just transferring it to the new property. So on a perfect scenario, call it, you're buying a property that's either worth less, or if what you're getting from the proceeds, you're putting it all into the new purchase, you're transferring, and you're just porting one mortgage from one property A to property B, right? However, usually it's not the case. A lot of times clients are porting to increase. So they'll port and increase. So that means is they'll port whatever they have from property A to property B and increase the difference to get a new mortgage. For a lot of financial institutions, what they'll do then is they'll blend the rate to what they had to what they could get at this moment. Not every one of them will do this. Some of them will actually get you to port the rate, because essentially that's what you're porting, the terms of it.
That's what you want, yeah.
And get another component for the difference if you need be.
Okay.
So it could be advantageous. It just depends on everyone's situation is completely different. But those are the options that they have when buying one to the other. So the kicker here is that you need to make sure that you have, in order to do this, at the time of closing of the purchase, you have to have a firm sale agreement on property A, on the one you're selling.
Yeah.
So by firm, I mean like there's no conditions left, no inspection, no financing. It's completely firmly sold. It's just going to close after your purchase closes, which usually is the best case scenario, because it gets the buyers the chance to move, take the time making that move. And it's not like you're closing one day and then the other one's closing the next day.
Yeah, you're not trying to move in 24 hours.
Correct.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it does take time to move, especially at homes. Like we have a lot of stuff that needs to be packed and stuff, right? So those are the options that you have when it comes to purchasing purchasing one while you still have the other at some point. The other case, whereas if you close on the sale before the purchase, depending on the financial institutions, they will waive the penalty that you would have paid if you reinvest their funds within 60 to 90 days. So that's also things that we see. And again, depends. It's case by case.
Mm-hmm.
It's not every financial institution that does this. They all have different parameters of their funds, the bucket of funds, we call it. But those are what the options that they would have into those terms.
Right. Okay. I mean, that makes sense. It's a lot to digest and consume, but
it's confusing sometimes.
It can be, for sure.
Oh, well,
I think it's very important to understand, because I think bridge loan gets tossed around a lot and people don't necessarily understand the complexities and exactly what they need in order to make one, like to actually to secure one.
Yeah, and when you say bridge loan too, I'm gonna add to it. Bridge loans are usually on a prime plus, and it's in an open rate.
Yeah.
So you can pay it off at any point, but you're not getting that rate that you'd be getting on your mortgage. It's more expensive.
They're gonna make
because they're open funds. Exactly. They want it's a short term. They want to make some money in that short term allocation of funds.
What would you say? Let's say, I know it's going to vary much on the mortgage and the numbers involved, but like let's say on an average home in Ottawa, which is, you know, let's say average sale price is about 660 in the city.
Yeah.
What would you say if someone was buying a 660 and they're moving up from 450? What would be an average bridge loan of like 90 days, 3 months?
It just depends on the down payment, how much equity they have on the sale of the other 20%. One. So those are the two things that we have to. Those are the things that they make us our requirements. Is we need to get the mortgage statement of the current sale of where that is.
Sure.
And what's your new purchase price? So then
Give
just
me a
to see that difference.
If it's like a 20% down payment, not to throw like crazy.
Like in terms of like how much it would cost.
Yeah.
Anywhere between 500 to 1,000 a month.
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
So it's not like
we're not talking like $20,000.
No.
Of course
not. It's because you're just getting. It's essentially interest only.
Yeah. So we want to know what that is because
Yeah.
it's something that people should be budgeting for.
Oh yeah, totally. And you want to make sure that you make your numbers, and you want to make sure that the financial institutions are capable of doing this. This is where it's important. You know how I always say the rate's not the most important thing? This is one of the cases, because if your financial institution is able to do the bridge loan, then you don't have to go private.
Yeah. Sure.
The last thing you want to do with this is to go private, because that's when you pay more money, plus you pay a fee in order to do so. So it's not impossible, and in some cases it might be more economical if the financial institution doesn't provide this bridge, but you're still keeping your low rate.
Yeah.
It could be like more economical to go private. I know private's thrown out there, and it's usually a taboo. Nobody wants to talk about it. Everybody understands that as being super expensive funds, but there are moments where private makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just on a case by case scenario, right? But for the bridge loans, just kind of give you, it could be anywhere depending on the amount. It can go anywhere from 200 to 1,000. It just depends on the amount that you're getting.
Oh, it's good information. I'm sure a lot of people assumed it might have been higher than that.
Yeah.
Right.
And it can be just because you think like, oh, I'm getting an additional loan, and this amount that's going to be amortized or in any way, but it's not. So it's just interest only.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. So going back to the selling and the buying, I mean, those are very good things to consider from a mortgage perspective.
Yeah.
Of how these things are going to work, because a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, people are upsizing, they're not downsizing, right?
Yeah.
It's usually later in life we see that. So majority of transactions we do, it's usually someone moving up.
Yeah.
And a condo to townhome to detached, whatever that looks like, right?
And that's usually the case. That's why we say like a 90-day time period is additionally the safest bet for that. But I do have a question regarding that then at that point for you on your side. How many times do you see a realtor representing on a sale and a purchase the same client?
Sorry.
So let me rephrase that question, please. I guess. A realtor representing the sale of the home.
Yep.
And then
the buyer,
the buyers
same home
at the same home.
Okay. So multiple representation.
Exactly. That's what you would call it, right? Yeah.
That's the official.
Okay. Official term for it.
That's what they call it.
Is it still legal? Because I know in other provinces it's not.
It depends. I can't quote other provinces. I know that it is certainly. I think it's BC. It's like an absolute no.
Mm-hmm.
Ontario, it is very much legal. It just needs to be acknowledged by both parties.
Mm-hmm.
So, December 1st last year, we had new legislation roll into our real estate industry, which allowed for 2 types of representation. So you had a brokerage level representation and you had a designated representation. So brokerage level, meaning that the brokerage represents the client. So if you have
office.
Yeah, the office, exactly. The office represents the clients. That would be the seller and the buyer. That would be considered multiple representation. Okay. Even if you had 2 separate agents.
From the same office.
From the same office, it's multiple.
So why is that important?
Well,
because I think I know, but I just sure.
It's a great question, right? So if I look at it, like let's say I'm representing the seller, and we have already established our oh my gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Our relationship. Mm-hmm. So I have a contractual duty to sell their house as fast as possible for the most money possible.
Yeah.
Right. If I have a brokerage level representation and there's another realtor from our office who has a buyer who they have a contractual obligation to get the lowest price for that property. In the past, up until last year, that would have been considered multiple representation and had to be acknowledged by both parties. Because, are those realtors talking at the water cooler? Information can overlap and there's no like hard line of like what kind of conversations are being had behind closed doors. So now with designated representation, which is exactly what our brokerage operates as, I could represent the seller as a designated representative, and even someone from my team could be representing the buyer as a designated representative.
Okay.
We would not consider that multiple representation. I'm representing the seller, they're representing the buyer. We do not talk about it. And then it draws those hard lines in the sand of like who's representing who and whose interests are in whose corner.
Plus, I feel that it also gives some transparency, right? Because like
absolutely,
in situations where there was multiple offers, there could be blurred lines.
Yeah,
on this
100%, and we see that a lot, right? Even now, because we've still seen multiple offers on properties. Right up until yesterday, I got a notification on one that we viewed on Wednesday. And a lot of the times that seller representative will say like, we've received 2 offers. Neither are from my brokerage or team. Because, if you're
you have
in
to be transparent in that
of course, you need to disclose it. Because if you are representing both parties, not that you'd be able to necessarily prove anything, but you are acknowledging the fact that you are representing the buyer and the seller.
Yeah.
And you would do, whether you want to say it out loud or not, like we all can call out the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
They have information that can benefit them on either side of the coin here.
Well, they totally do.
It's an unfair advantage, right? So,
but then that brings the question of like, what if you're representing both the buyer and the
exactly.
seller in that transaction? Because it's like, who is your contractual obligation at that point?
Where's the obligation?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, and the only reason I bring this up is like, it is good terms. Like I was showing a property for like an apartment for a house rental of a client. And I'm not in real estate, by the way. I'm just this was property management, doing a favor more than anything.
Yeah, that's fair.
But just for our viewers, they were telling me how they had it listed in Quebec, and they had the selling agent also was the one who brought them the offer. But then it's like you're kind of in the middle of it because their offer was sitting there for like maybe 30 something days, and then when the Bank of Canada drop of October came, they got like multiple offers. But they accepted this one from the same agent that was selling their home because it was more money, even though there was some conditions. I actually have to follow up with them, just kind of see where things lie, because I was curious to see what was going to happen. And it definitely adds to another question, which we'll talk about it after. But at what point are you, as that agent, are you representing the best interest of either or?
Because you can't. I don't think you can have it both ways.
No, you can't.
Like for me personally and morally,
how is it you can't eat the cookie and have it too, or like that saying, or like?
I can say, not like I'm not proudly tooting my own horn here or anything, but I've never done it. I don't. I can't get around it in my head. It just sounds kind of, it's funky, right? Like I can't get you as a seller the most money for your property possible and negotiate the best terms for you possible while doing the exact same thing for the person on the other side. Like I'm negotiating with myself, right?
You're in between. It's not like you have a little angel and a little devil here, and then you're kind of just talking like, hey, I'll give you this, and then I'll give you this, like
it doesn't work that way. You have,
as a human, you're going to favor one to the other.
You more or less become a mediator between two parties, because it's very difficult to lend advice to one side without lending it to the other, right? If I know what the absolute bottom is for the seller, I know absolutely what the top is for the buyer. How do I work that into a way that is above board for everybody? It's very difficult.
It's extremely difficult, and the only way that I could think of it is just by hitting the middle.
Yeah, but is that fair though?
But it's not fair for one, because you're making one pay more and the other one take less. So then that's what I'm like.
Of course. So if you knew that your seller would accept less and you knew that your buyer would give more, are you just like, how do you make it how do you meet in the middle? I don't do it, right? I never. We do designated representation now, especially within our team as well. And we've done deals this year where we've had 2 agents from our team representing the buyer and the seller, but they treat it as such, as those are their people, and we're negotiating head to head, just like they would with any other agent.
So you
right?
guys basically go to war for that week. You don't talk to each other. You don't. You're just like, hey, no, I'm not seeing it, Tony. Bye.
But that's the way it should be, man.
Yeah, yeah.
I struggle. I've always struggled because even before this legislation came into play, like I still struggled with it because, even when we do rentals, it's a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
There's not as much on the line.
Yeah,
let's say.
There's a set price, and then you're negotiating for terms more than anything.
Exactly, and like in that scenario, we have done multiple representation, but it's still an acknowledgement that needs to be signed by everybody. Because, let's say from a buyer's perspective, you didn't really understand the hierarchy of what was going on. And you just assumed I'll go right to the listing agent because I'm going to get the best deal from the listing agent. A lot of people still feel that way. Like, even with our listings, like we get people reaching out to us all the time saying, "Hey, I'd love to set up a showing." We're like, "Hey, are you working with a realtor?" They say, "No, I'd rather deal with you directly," which I'm always kind of bewildered by because it's like you're walking into the lion's den, right? You're unrepresented, so you chose not to be represented by someone who could look out for your best interests, and you want to come deal with us directly, full well knowing that I have a contractual obligation to the seller to get them the best deal for them.
But I feel that the reason why they do that, at least in my opinion, is because they think that they'll get a deal
100%.
by going through and cutting that other person off.
But it's not that. It's never that way, man. It's not that way.
And that's the thing. But it's not even. I see it as you're even you're putting yourself in exposure because, yes, you're under a contract obligation to disclose everything.
Yeah,
100%. But then it also puts them in a position where you're not necessarily representing 100% their best interest because it's not a buyer. I'm guessing it's not a buyer representation. It's just like a
there's a couple different types of those kind of representations. So you could have like a client representation where like you are working in the best interest of your client. You're providing advice, market research, that type of thing. Or you can just be like a client representation where you're more or less just under the direction of that person. Like they're saying, "Hey, put this number on paper."
And you're not saying
I don't need your advice on anything else. You're basically just like, tell me where to fill out this. You show them the APS and say, "What would you like to put here?" Which is, again, not great, right? Because you're not coaching them. Like if someone wants to do that and they get to the Schedule A, or the additional clauses and conditions that they can insert into an offer, I can't say like, "Hey, this is where you would put your mortgage financing clause. This is where you put your inspection."
Give them the document. It's like, what do you want to?
I can't tell them what to say. I can't tell them what to write.
Oh wow!
I can't coach them on anything. So they could write in their own, but they're not lawyers. They're not realtors. They're not. I'd say 99% of the time, there's no way they're getting it right.
And I agree because like a lot of the times, and we've discussed this, there's a lot of miseducation and misinformation that clients will think like, "Oh, I know this," or "I got this." And don't get me wrong, some of the times they might,
sure,
but like you said, majority of them don't. And it's like those are important aspects where I always feel like that's where it's important to have some type of representation because you're not an expert at everything. No. You don't do this on a day-to-day basis. You're not an expert at it.
No.
If I were to go to client's job and be like, "Hey, okay, I'm going to do your job," and not like, it's like, you're kind of telling them like, "Oh, I don't need you in this way." It's like, I'm not an expert at it. I'm not going to succeed in it. Yeah.
The thing is, a lot of the times that commission that they think they're saving is already going to be paid by the seller anyway, right? Yeah. Like it's spoken for whether they come in. So they're not going to come in and say, "I want a 2% discount because I'm not using someone." It doesn't necessarily work that way. And where a lot of people think they're saving the commissions. Yeah. I used to do a lot of new home sales in the Guelph area in Kitchener-Waterloo. And a lot of people thought that. They said, "Well, I don't have an agent, so I want the commission." And we would simply say like, "Well, no, it doesn't work that way. Like if you don't have an agent, it's because you choose not to have one. It doesn't mean you get a 2% discount off the top."
Just because of it.
Exactly.
But I find that like, especially when the prices were very high, that's what people are aiming for.
Yeah.
To try to get it lower. And I've heard stories where they went without representation and they're paying for it afterwards.
100%.
By it being a leak, something that wasn't fully disclosed. But how you have no leg to stand on.
Nothing.
Because you chose not to for a haircut. And the worst part is sometimes and I see it in the mortgage world, you do this for what? Like 2% of the sale price. Okay, how much is that? Like 20K, 30K, maybe? Give or take, depending on the amount.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think we're talking about, we're talking about $500,000. That's a small percentage of the bigger piece of the pie, right?
Correct. And what I was leading for is on the mortgage amount, when you add that, your monthly payment doesn't increase. It increases, but not substantially to the point that it's
Worth
detrimental.
forfeiting all your
Exactly. And that's where it's
safety
very
nets.
important. It's like, and I'll just use this analogy just because we have snow coming. It's like driving in the winter with summer tires. You can do it. No, I don't. I have to. I'm getting them in 2 weeks, unfortunately.
2 weeks.
Yeah. Like, no, actually, a week and a half.
Okay, sorry.
But still, like, it's you're kind of taking that risk. Can you do it? Totally. But then it's that
Should you
risk
do
of
it?
like, should you do it? No. And like this, my opinion, no, not because of just my well-being, because of also the well-being of the people that are driving
100%.
around. So it's kind of in the same aspects. Like, can you do this? Totally. Should you do it? Maybe it's not the best idea for it.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, I'm trying to like get my thoughts in a row here, but to your point, if we're representing a seller, if I'm representing a seller, and someone wants to see it, they reach out to realtor.ca. It's I don't deal with it directly.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give it to one of the team members, because that way, if they are indeed interested on it, that's great. Like, bring me an offer.
Mm-hmm.
I want to sell this house.
Yeah.
But they can have proper representation with someone within our team,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not multiple representation. It's still 2 separate designated representatives, going head to head in a negotiation with the best interests of their respective parties.
That's. I feel that should be the way to do it.
100%.
Because it removes the.
Everyone can sleep well at night.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I understand there's markets in Ontario and probably the world where multiple representation needs to exist. Like, if you have a town of a couple hundred people and there's one realtor,
Yeah.
it's hard to say like, oh, I'm only the designated rep. But if you don't have anyone to work with and you're the only realtor, like, there's going to be some scenarios, and
we should find out what towns only have one realtor and just go get our license.
Yeah, no kidding. What's north of Timmins? I don't want to know.
I mean, we could make the drive now.
No. What are you doing later? No, I think what they did was good with that.
Yeah.
Like, multiple representation. Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't work for me personally.
Yeah. No, and I totally agree with you. I think that you shouldn't. Like, I've had clients who are like, oh, we're working with the listing agent. I'm like, are you sure?
Yeah.
And then it kind of, I personally take that responsibility because of the experience of like, hey, make sure that you put this, make sure that you put this, make sure. But even I don't see that on a day-to-day basis. I don't know. I know from receiving agreements, from talking to you, from talking to Jen, Leo, and the team, like, I can see that, but I don't see it on a day-to-day. But I'm like, oh, you have to make sure that you add this clause, and then now this clause, and then now this clause.
Yeah.
Because it's not my bread and butter.
And that's just the thing, right? Even for sale by owners and that type of stuff, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And, I don't discount the fact that, realtors, a lot of the time can be quite expensive, especially, if you feel like you're capable of doing all the stuff yourself, let alone the showings and the preparation, the staging and all that stuff that goes into, prepping your home for sale.
Yeah.
It's what we're talking about today. It's the negotiations, it's the conditions, it's the stuff that's really gonna protect you and help you have the best outcome.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time that's not going to be just price. It could be closing date. It could be, conditions or lack thereof that could benefit you in the long run. That's why I say it all the time. If a buyer was like, hey, I want to go see this for sale by owner, like, is that okay? I'm always like, absolutely. Like, why wouldn't we? And they're like, well, we saw it. We don't know if they're going to be cooperating. It's like, it's fine. Well, I can negotiate between another agent. I can negotiate with this for sale by owner. I should be able to anyway, to protect my interest as well, but their interest too. If a for sale by owner wants to negotiate with me, who's been doing this for as long as I have, who's, had training for this, I'm happy to take on that challenge. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I'm up for the challenge. I like welcome it.
It's interesting because there's so many options that, like you said, they're available, but not necessarily means it's the right one. Like the other one would be even brokerages with lower fees, where it's, and we can talk about it more in another episode, but based on experience, I know that I had a client with Leo where like they haven't received their deposit back. and the listing brokerage was one with a lower fee, you can call it, and
Because they don't have a brick and mortar. There's no
exactly, there's
office.
nobody to pick up the
Oh
phone. There's no
of
all this
course,
stuff,
you
and
can't call anybody.
it's just harder. So even as a seller, you see it as like, how are they actually representing my best interest if they're not on top of it all
Yeah.
the time? Like, yes, you're paying less, but then you might also be leaving money on the table.
100%, man. 100%. We so you know, our episode last week we talked about this Frankenstein HVAC system that I came across. So only because you brought this up and remembering it, well, we picked up the deposit check back, so we've been released from that deal.
Yeah.
I'm told that the sellers, didn't know a lot about what was going on down there, that they're fixing this up now. All these issues are going to be fixed. They're kind of like, are your people still interested if we get all these things fixed and addressed? I had a conversation with my people, and they said, you know what? If they do what they say they're going to do, like, we'll go back and take a look at it. We can't promise that we'll put another offer in, but we'll at least
reconsider it.
Yeah.
But then,
which I think was, it's a good agent. She's a fantastic agent on the other side, keeping the lines of communication open. Because my people, they like the house, but it's just like there's a lot of liability in that, if it's not done correctly, they don't want to be the ones that are going to be left fixing all these mistakes for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. And the hard part about that, I would say, is just how me as a seller, as a buyer, and maybe playing devil's advocate here, is how do I know that the repairs were done adequately 100%. In a way that like will be sufficient, and it wasn't just done to let's brush it up, cover up, and then get it out of our heads.
Great question. And they asked that question to me, and I said, if you went and you looked at it and you liked what you saw, we would go back and we would, pick up our home inspection where we left off.
Okay.
And I would go above and beyond that to bring in an HVAC specialist on the same night
to make sure
it was done. Because our home inspector that we use, a lot of them are not all, a lot of them, all of them are fantastic. But I would want to have someone who specializes in those types of systems alone to come in and say, yep, it's done correctly. This has all been fixed. It's all done to code. It's safe.
Especially if this was already at the forefront.
Yeah.
It was already seen. You saw it. It was an issue. You want to make sure that issue is 100% taken care of, either by it being a new furnace, new hot water tank system there, and reliable, not something that was like, oh, we bought it off Facebook Marketplace to just put it in, dump it in.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's working.
And it's not just like we got the cheapest options possible, because we see this a lot in, the aftermath of home inspections.
Yeah.
Let's say the buyer's still willing to move forward if the seller fixes ABC. A lot of the times I'll coach my clients to say, sometimes
you're better off getting a haircut,
better off getting the
yourself.
cash and you're taking it off the top and then fixing it yourself, because most of the time, unfortunately, sellers just want it to be over with and they pick the cheapest option available. And as you can probably guess, cheap is not always the best option.
Cheap is not always the best option. Like, I've learned through the years of doing renovations, I prefer to pay once and do it right.
Yeah, my suggestion to clients is get 3 quotes.
Yeah.
And then, do your research on the companies that are providing them.
Yeah.
And then go with your gut, because 9 times out of 10 your gut's going to be right.
And go with your gut in terms of how you feel when you're communicating and relating with the person doing the job, because that's who you're going to be dealing with as the job progresses.
100%.
So if you got somebody that's the cheapest, but then your gut was telling you like, oh, I don't know if I like, or I don't know if I can vibe with this person. Yeah. You got to remember, just because it's the cheapest, it doesn't mean it's going to, it might give you more headaches. It might give you this. This
100%.
Is why.
That's the thing. You might have to fix it again.
And that's what's happened to me in the past, where unfortunately made the mistake of going with the cheapest, and it was a bathroom. Yeah, and I'll just use this example, shower. They forgot to put the membrane.
Oh.
So damn. You don't see it immediately. You don't see it immediately. Yes. No, laugh, because when I saw it, I'm like, wow. It's a lesson learned. Yeah. But now, how do you get to the point that you know more as you do these things, just by doing them? But it's the one thing that I always, now it's like, okay, you're not going to find out what wasn't done until it's too late, and you have to rip it all apart. So imagine paying to get it done, everything, tile off, everything off, new shower system, and basically having to put.
Did they come back?
We ended up putting it. No, we just stopped. Like, this was, you're talking about almost 5 years after.
Oh, it was a long time. Okay.
So, but still, you're not doing this for like a 5-year. It's not a T-shirt that we're buying.
Yeah,
and it's like, so those are the things that nowadays I'm like, I'm not cheaping electrician. plumber and I know my people, and
those are the things I don't touch myself personally.
either. Yes. I'm just like, those are the two things that I'm like, I'm hiring somebody 100%.
I consider myself relatively handy, and like when it comes to switching out a light or a thermostat in our house, Louisa will do it. It's so funny. I'll just watch. I'm the one handing her the screwdriver.
You're the one. She's the one doing all the work.
Freaks me out, man. Electricity.
Oh yeah, you got it.
Never
Have you
been
gotten
shocked.
shocked
No,
before?
never. I'm just like,
yeah.
it's just something.
It's actually interesting because it's like you get like that little tingly sensation all around, and those are like the minimal ones. I've talked to electricians where they're like their hand is numb for like a week, and it's like, no, I would never want to get it to that point of it for sure. But like, it's just, those are the things that like where your money should go to in terms of repairs.
Okay, so this is kind of the last, as we're getting there, but this is something I want to touch on. Now we're talking about doing things appropriately, and noticing repairs that might need to come into the future. So I saw a modular home this week.
Okay. What is a modular home?
So it comes in pieces and it's put together.
It's like a
Lego.
Like a real life Lego.
Kind of like real.
And
life.
do they put it in the space? Like,
like you would build a foundation and it just fits together.
Okay.
Right? And you're the ones that have, like, I guess your contractor, yourself, whoever is going to put it together from the inside, attaching and fastening these pieces together. It's pretty wild.
I just imagine
it's
like
new,
like a master hand just grabbing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the like affordable housing stuff is kind of transitioning into this
3D prints.
Yeah, I was listening to some stuff in like Saskatoon this week at CBC about this. It's kind of fascinating because it makes sense if it's affordable, right? Because that's the thing. Building has become so expensive. How do you make affordable or low income housing if it's so bloody expensive to build? But anyway,
and it takes so long to build. So this shortens the time frame too.
So this particular property, it looked like it was a severed piece of about, I think it was 2 acres that was severed off the corner of a larger piece of property. And then they built a foundation, ICF, which is insulated concrete forms. Okay. Really, really nice foundation size. Okay. There's like 9-foot ceilings in the basement.
He did like a little hesitation there, so I'm like,
that's not what I'm curious. So I'll give you a little bit of backstory on this. We saw the property a couple of weeks ago, okay, and then this week my client said, you know what, we want to go back and take a second look because maybe we can make it work. It was very cosmetically, it was nice enough on the inside, like very move-in ready. It did kind of seem though that like the person that was building this like either just gave up on it when it was so close to the finish line, or maybe they ran out of money. I'm not necessarily sure on the total backstory to it. When I say that, there's certain things inside the house that were giving me those kind of red flags. So like, let's say the trim work, for example, like the crown moldings weren't caulked or painted. Okay. So they went through the trouble of putting up the crown and then they didn't finish it. Same with the baseboards.
So they cut corners.
They just got lazy, it seemed. Like, there was, you could tell, like, so think about it this way, like a sandwich kind of coming together and all your stuff in the middle, your toppings or whatever, that's where the join is. So they had run this plaster down the length of the house, and then they put this popcorn ceiling up, and then they didn't paint it. So you could just see where the join was.
And that's curious because usually you put popcorn ceiling to hide imperfections.
Yeah. Well, and they did it. You couldn't see the join. Sorry, you couldn't see the join. You could see the difference in color. So they just didn't paint it. It just made sense to me.
You're cutting, but okay. And I would just give them the benefit of the doubt. Are you sure it was done, or was it just that they were finishing it up?
No. Well, I mean, there hadn't been any work completed in the 2 weeks period that we were not there. Everything was exactly the same. Okay. There was no indication in the listing saying that like XYZ would be done beforehand. There was even some stuff that said like, this is not operating as it should be. Some stuff with the foundation, like we found some water damage down there.
Yeah, that's not ever good.
And that was the thing, right? So we go back to this modular home, and I was kind of excited. I love carpentry. It was something cool I hadn't seen before, right? So the second time we're there, it's less like, you're not like, oh, everything's really pretty and we could probably deal with the crown molding. We could do that in a weekend, blah, blah, blah. Painting's not a big deal. We get a little bit more into the nitty gritty of it. So, we saw some flickering lights that we didn't notice the first time. Like, yeah, maybe it's a bulb. We had to check it out in a home inspection. Still same thing. If you wanted to offer on it, we're getting a home inspection because, first of all, I don't know modular homes very well, and I'm very honest about that. So we want to
they're
know.
so new, like they're newish, you know.
Yeah, to Canada for sure, right? So I just said we'd have to have an inspector come and check the wiring, the plumbing, etc. So we spent a lot of time in the basement during our second showing, and then the things kind of started to unravel, unfortunately. So right off the bat, noticed some water standing in the basement.
This is a brand new home too.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it's not like water that was there 2 years ago and dried up. Like you could see, like some of the drywall had even been a bit damp. So you're kind of like, that's not a great first impression for a brand new home. We went on and cracks in foundations are normal. You go down in a basement of a home, even a new home, there's some settling that goes on.
Yeah.
Hairline cracks, I should say, are normal in homes.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
So
they're not big ones.
Yeah, like the way you measure a crack in a basement, and you should always, if you do have one in your home, anyone listening, you should be monitoring it every 6 months to a year. Just have a little ruler, and that's all you have to do is measure it. So like a 1 millimeter crack is considered a hairline crack. It's really not that big of a deal unless you can see like visible water getting through. A lot of the time, it's not the case. When a crack starts and continues to grow, anything like up to 6 millimeters is considered like, it's not the end of the world. Anything past 6 millimeters isn't a big issue. Now, fortunately, like, the science and repairs to these things have come a long way in the last couple of decades. It's actually relatively inexpensive to have a foundation crack repaired. I've had clients do a couple this year, and both were under $2,000.
Did they repaired it from the inside though? They didn't dug up.
Yeah, and these are older homes. Like one was 1980 and one was early 2000s.
The price makes a difference when you need a little tractor to come and do
excavate
the space
for sure.
When you don't.
Yeah, agreed. You're absolutely right. And direction of the crack has a lot to do. Like up, north to south is a lot better than east to west, and vice versa. But this crack that we found this is a bungalow, so it started at the back side of the bungalow, right down the middle to the front. So it was one continuous crack from front to back. And I've never seen that before. And some of it was starting to chip away. So not a great sign, right? Like there's some immediate settling going on. There's clearly a lot of moisture surrounding this foundation, and it's already wreaking some havoc inside.
That's not good.
No.
At all. And like, I don't know much. Like I know a bit about like foundations and concrete and stuff like that, but like not for like the one that you mentioned. The only thing I could think of is like maybe they were too rushed to do it, that they didn't let the concrete settle.
A lot of the time, when you build a foundation has a lot to do with it. Like obviously building in spring, summer, fall is a lot more desirable. You can put a foundation in the middle of winter, but where the frost line is and that type of thing and how far you're digging down has a lot to do with this. Yeah. I can't comment on when they did it. I'm not sure, but that type of crack to me would have been a red flag for sure. And then because it's an unfinished basement, like we happened to run the water in the kitchen sink upstairs just to kind of see how the pressure was on our second visit. And then afterwards we're kind of walking around downstairs and we just see the drips coming down from the kitchen. And I'm like, okay guys, so we have water in the basement. We have this crack that we're not sure of. The plumbing's leaking. Some of the electricity is already starting to flicker. Like my red flags are shooting off.
Yeah.
I'm like,
your alarms are going.
Yeah. I'm like, I know it's very pretty to look at.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing like, again, not that I'm an expert in it, but this is what we can see today.
Yeah.
So you give this house 5 or 10 years to really settle into its bones. Like what else are you going to be up against?
Then that's where it's like, we cannot like say this enough. Inspections, conditions matter.
Yeah. Protect yourself.
Big time. Protect yourself because you don't know. And yes, I understand that you don't have x-rays to see behind the walls, but there are some things that we can see, and inspectors are good at this to find, especially with the moisture. I think that little gun that they carry with it,
I think realtors should have one. I should really get one.
You should maybe that'll be a Christmas present.
I will say, like, a lot every day I get better at it, right? Every house you see, you get a little bit more fine-tuned to what you should be looking for, because it's easy to get distracted by all the cosmetics of a pretty home. And like I said, even if something's brand new, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was built properly or well. Yeah.
It just depends where they wanted to cut corners, how quick they wanted to make a profit.
Yeah. Right? So I thought that was interesting. First modular home I've seen. Hopefully not the last, but basically, if they did want to move forward with it, I would just protect them in a sense of having a home inspection. Then we'd want background on the property, like where did it come from? Yeah. Who put it together? Yeah. Who did the electrical?
Is there Terry on?
Yeah.
Is there Terry on these homes?
So if you're like you can build a home without being registered with Tarion. Like to have a Tarion license, I think it's like $2,000 or something to get it, but it takes a long time because it's like 2 years.
It's a long process, and then having to do it with Tarion and not, it's more expensive to do it with.
For those wondering, Tarion is the home warranty program in Ontario for all new homes.
Yeah, but that also means that if you do it without, I think by law you have to live in it by at least a year.
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
So this house was built in 2022.
Oh, so they had the year mark.
Technically. Now I could tell that no one was living in it besides some like dingy mattress in the basement. But if they owned it and it was, say if they got their occupancy in 2023 and they waited till 2024 to sell it, I guess that technically would be the year, right?
The year, but then it also tells you like, what if it was just vacant for a full year and then nobody used it, and then now that you're testing it out and stuff like that, it's where things are coming to show. Yeah. That's not good.
So we'll keep an eye on it. I'm curious to know what it sells for. It actually did get a conditional sale, so someone picked it up.
That's why it says like it's important to have proper representation. For these things,
and just have someone who knows what they're looking
doing
for
and looking for your best interest.
Yeah, and all realtors start somewhere. I'm not dogging on people without experience.
No, for sure.
Because I was one of those people at some point. But for those types of properties, like if you're looking at anything rural outside the city, something that you're inexperienced in, like even if your realtor at the time is not totally well versed in it, have them have a second opinion on it. If it was something I was
then
totally
there's no shame to that.
No, exactly. All of us, no one's an expert in everything.
No.
We all got to start somewhere. So, that being said, man, we're cruising.
It's good.
Yeah, it's good. Time flies when you're having fun.
It does.
So what's on the docket for the weekend? I know because everyone's dying.
I'm not doing lawn work for once. Picked up on my leaves, which I was happy that they took this morning. But finally, you could say,
you got some Christmas stuff up.
Some Christmas decoration. Yeah.
Okay.
Christmas is here, basically December around the corner. Family, my parents are here, so I'm gonna spend time with them before they leave.
Nice.
And then I believe we're having something for Neela, so my niece,
it's her birthday
on
today.
Saturday. Her birthday is Saturday. So
nice.
That's tomorrow, Saturday. Oh yeah, today's Friday. I'm losing track of days. What about you?
How
was the spa?
Oh man, I feel like I'm bad at relaxing. I do. I don't know. It was.
You're always on the phone. That's why.
Well, it's not even that. I feel like I'm not worthy of those situations sometimes.
Oh,
so
come on.
I'm getting better at it. It was fine. I had.
You get the massage?
Yeah, I got the massage. I'm very awkward. I think it was okay. I'll let you know.
I think your second massage.
Yeah, I need something to compare it to. It was like she was fine, but honestly, there was parts where I was like, I think Louisa could do this better than what she's doing right now. No offense to her, she was very lovely, but maybe I'm just too picky. But no, nothing planned for this weekend.
Fine.
I think
laying low.
A couple of showings tomorrow, and I think we'll lay low.
Bills playing Sunday or Monday.
Sunday.
Big game.
San Francisco. 49ers.
Ooh, that's a big game.
They're a bit like in shambles, so
San Francisco, or
they're not as good as they were last year. So we'll see.
Okay. Well, the Bills are coming from Detroit, a big win.
So, yeah, we're coming off the biggest win of the year. So actually, something funny enough, I saw that was the most watched football game since like 2009 outside of Thanksgiving and Christmas Day games.
Wow.
Like America really was rooting for the Bills.
Oh, wow.
No, I'm serious. Yeah. It's like Kansas City versus the rest of the country.
Yeah, basically.
Or potentially.
But you kind of wonder, it's like, is it just the haters? It's like, okay, everybody wants Kansas City to lose at this point.
I don't know, man. I won't comment on it too much. I think they've gotten pretty lucky.
You're like, I'm a fan of the Bills, so that's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. Josh Allen is
they did
savior.
get lucky.
Yeah,
I know we were watching the game together. They did get lucky in that moment, but that's good.
Yeah, man. So that's it, guys.
Anyways.
Let us know what you thought of the episode. Let us know if you think we're full of BS or if we're on the right track here. Anything you want us to talk about, let us know. Yeah, are we getting better at this? Have you listened this far into the episode? Let us know. And if you are listening, be sure to like us on all the audio platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and
Apple Podcast.
Apple Podcast. Sorry. See, I'm not an Apple guy. I have an Apple phone, but
it's okay. Don't worry. I'm here for that.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Bye.